Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Aesthetics, the Business of Beauty. And today we're joined by a seasoned marketing and business leader with a penchant for building not just brands, but also teams and cultures. With roles including the Chief Commercial Officer at Advanced Medaeasthetics and Vice President of Marketing positions at both Allergan and Galderma, Drew brings to the table hands-on industry experience and insights. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, Duke University, and he currently lends his expertise by consulting and advising aesthetic companies, ensuring their growth and success. But beyond the roles and designations that stand out of his philosophy is to always do great work and enjoy the journey and learn along the way. So let's bring to the stage Drew. Hello, Drew.
Hi, Nell. How are you? Thanks for the really kind words and introduction.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. It was easy because it's all true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so good to be on.
Excellent. Excellent. So you've been in the aesthetics industry for a while. So wanted to pick your brain for our audience who are medical spa practitioners and owners so that we can learn from you. But before we dive into some of those questions, tell us a bit about yourself, especially the things that you're most proud of.
Yeah, no, thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks for reaching out. I always think it's funny because you get all kinds of unsolicited emails, requests, LinkedIn. I forget how you even reached out, but it was one of those where I answered the phone and had a conversation, and it's leading to an interesting conversation tonight. So I think that's just a great lesson as we think about things. It never hurts to talk to anyone. I was telling my oldest, he's a freshman at the Colorado School of Mines, just about networking. He's like, well, what do you think? Should I apply for this job? I was like, you know what? It's worth at least having a conversation. And I think that's part of the kind of philosophy that I've really started to take on is, it never hurts to talk to people. It never hurts to treat everyone with respect and understanding and be a little bit inquisitive and learn everyone's story and hear about it. So glad you reached out. But
yeah. Thank you. I wasn't, didn't expect what I was going to receive, but you don't know unless you ask.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite bosses, actually one of my first bosses when I worked at Eli Lilly right out of business school, I was a sales rep selling diabetes products. And he used to always tell me, he's like, you might not be the best salesperson, but there is one thing that I've learned in all my years of sales. I was like, oh, what's that? He's like, you don't get what you don't ask for. So at the very least, you should always ask because you never know what you're going to get.
Wow.
So sounds like a good lesson for life, I think.
Absolutely. Yes. And so then you retained that, remember that through all these years. So it must've been one of your touchstones.
Yeah, so I've had a good journey. You asked about my things I'm passionate about. So you were asking for what I do for fun. My fun is I have 4 kids, so that generally keeps me fun. So I've got 2 boys, 2 girls, 11, 13, 16, and 19. So They're kind of all over the board with adventures and traveling and art and doing whatever keeps them happy and interested. So that tends to be where I spend most of my time. But
Yes,
yeah, so I've
awesome.
had a good run with those guys, and we're keeping going. We just got back from a fall break trip to the Northeast. We were in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, going to
Wow.
Acadia National Park and seeing a bunch of the fall colors. It's something we hadn't done before. So we always like to do a bunch of adventures, and this was a great adventure. Seeing new places, learning new things is definitely kind of part of the philosophy that I've always kept close to myself.
Well, absolutely. Yes. And leave the doors open to opportunities too. So are the colors really as vibrant as we've seen in the pictures?
Oh, they are, especially when the sun comes out, it's really pretty beautiful, different, just a different part of the world. I live in Texas, so something we don't always see, but it was chilly, but love to kind of get away and see some of those cool places, see the
Yeah.
original Ben and Jerry's and eat some great cheeses and in Vermont and lobster fresh out of the water and in New Hampshire
Oh,
or in Maine, and I think I had more lobster rolls that I know what to do with, but it was a good time, that's for sure.
oh, absolutely. I love shellfish. That's one of
Hmm.
my, I'll order seafood and shellfish anytime, any
A
day.
little different than Southern California, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, could be really different. Yes. Okay. Awesome. So then, so out of business school, then did you
Yeah,
start? Can
yeah.
you
So
tell
it was
us
at
that journey?
so University of Michigan Business School, and got hired into Eli Lilly. So
Mhm,
worked there for about 10 years, diabetes, the whole way through, a bunch of different sales and marketing jobs. Thought I'd be there forever. Actually worked on one of the original GLP-1 products, a brand called Byetta.
mm,
GLP-1s are all the rage right now with semaglutide and Mounjaro and tirzepatide, Ozempic, all this kind of stuff. So I've kind of watched those brands and products and classes grow over the years, which has been fascinating.
mhm,
And
mhm,
then got recruited into aesthetics about a little over 9 years ago by a mentor of mine, actually the person who hired me out of Eli Lilly. And
mhm.
she'd gone to this company called Galderma right when they had been sold from Valiant to Nestle, and said, "I've got this cool opportunity. Why don't you check it out?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Man, this makes a lot of sense." So get down to Texas. I was there at Galderma for about 7 years. Launched a whole bunch of different new products and fillers and indications. They had a really great run. Still a great company with a bunch of great people there, and saw a lot of growth in the industry. And then, about 2.5 years or so ago, got recruited by another mentor of mine, who had gone to AbbVie and then now to Allergan Aesthetics, and
Mhm,
they had an opportunity to oversee some of the facial portfolio there, so Botox and Juvederm, among other things. So if you have a chance
mhm.
to work at Allergan in the aesthetics industry, it's a great place. Again, great company with some great people. Was
Right.
there for a little while, and then last fall, kind of started doing my own thing. So I'm doing a bunch of advising and consulting, fractional executive leadership outside the big companies now. So working with a bunch of practices. Like you mentioned, I had a stint with one of the large kind of consolidating companies, kind of these PE back style companies. And then working with kind of early stage aesthetic startups, technologies, etc. So have kind of seen the industry from all sides at this point in time over the past 9 years or so.
Yes, and I'd like to take advantage of that background of yours. And we'll
Yeah.
dive into your current company, but could you tell us, because you've been at the forefront of a lot of new products that came out of some major companies.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about going back to Galderma?
Yeah. So
What
I think
your products were like?
yeah, you see in aesthetics that innovation is really a driver of growth. And I was fortunate when I was at Galderma, we had a lot of innovation that was coming down the pipeline and that we were kind of investing in. I think
Hmm.
one of the hallmarks of that is not just innovation, but really understanding at the end of the day, like where are the customer and consumer needs that really aren't being met and how can you best meet them? And I think if you look at a lot of the growth in the aesthetics industry over the past 20 years, not just the part of time that I've been in it, but it's really been driven by innovation, either in products, services, business models, whatever it might be. But it's that innovation is driving the business when it's very focused on what customers really, really need. And if you can meet that in a strong way, you can tend to grow your business, grow their customers' business, and really drive the whole industry forward. So I think that's kind of one of the hallmarks of aesthetics, and certainly was a hallmark of my time when I was at Galderma. That's for sure.
Yeah, so hence the title of our presentation today, Thinking Practice First. So you have a career where that was a principle by which you operated.
Yeah.
And innovation is the other principle.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been funny because once I left some of the big companies, I started working more on the practice side of the business. It kind of opens your eyes a little bit to the real world of like running and owning and trying to make small businesses very, very successful. It's easier said than done, that's for sure. So shout out to all the people running great aesthetic practices and small businesses. Like, it is yeoman's work, very rewarding work, but I know it's a lot of work. But this is one of the things I've seen over time is the industry really seems to evolve, and it's very, very hard for companies and to have brands or products or services and really have that strong customer centricity. And I kind of have a firm belief that, if there's companies that can figure out how to really put the practice first, so think through the practice rather than think through the brand, you're going to have a lot of success. Once you get on the practice side, you realize, man, everyone doesn't always have your best interest at heart. They certainly have their brand's best interest at heart. And a lot of times their brand's best interest aligns with your best interest as a practice owner. But that doesn't always happen. Someone may be selling some service that's really great and it's great for them. It may be great for you, but it's not always great for you. And so I've just come around to, the more we can think about how do we put the practice first, how do you make the practice very successful, that should have a lot of downstream effects to making various brands and services successful. And the companies that are able to do that, I think, are going to be particularly well off and positioned for the future. And that's where you can really bring a lot of innovation.
Oh, absolutely. And that insight is highly valuable for most businesses anyway. Just answer the issues and then provide a solution to a problem that your customer has, and they'll likely do business with you.
Yeah. It's hard though, because you're running your business, you're looking at your P&L and your balance sheet and thinking about your brand. But your stuff only gets successful usually if you have others helping make it successful. So sometimes those get at odds with how do you help a practice be successful. Sometimes they're not, and when they're not, I think that's when you see a lot of the real magic happen. So
Right.
there's a little bit of a flip from being, I want my brand to be successful in your practice, to I want your practice to be successful, and then my brand will be successful. Whether it's a brand, a product, a service, could be anything. Could be consulting services, could be a brand, could be something new in development, some other sort of innovation. But that kind of a little flip of mentality to, the first thing I want to do is make your practice successful versus the first thing I want to do to make my brand successful, will change your perspective.
But do you think that because people are researching more and they have more information available to them, that might have been one of the reasons for a flip in thinking?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a flip in thinking so much as just, consumers are becoming much more aware, so there's much more of a focus on consumers. The business is getting very, very big, so you tend to think more about how do I build my brand in big businesses. So it's hard to really say. I think some companies and products do it especially well. Others, maybe don't, and you could argue about which ones do and don't. Everyone certainly has an opinion on that. But at least that kind of mentality, I do think, is pretty important to how you kind of think about the future, especially now we're in probably a pretty uncertain economic environment. Aesthetics now is a huge multi-billion dollar business. I think in the 9 years I've been in here, it's probably doubled and then doubled again in size, if I really went back and looked at it. So it's just a step change, different size business. So it's easy to kind of get lost in things as you get a proliferation of companies, of products, of brands, of services, meeting the needs of this bigger and bigger business. So
For
just
sure.
something to, I always encourage everyone to really keep in mind, because when you're on the practice side of things, and at the end of the day, if the practices don't use your products, it's really hard. No matter what you do on the consumer front, it is a B2B2C model at the end of the day, and you got to make all the pieces sing.
Right, that's right. So as working with the larger companies through the practitioners, who are trying to deliver services to their end customers or end patient, do the larger companies see themselves in that stream, that delivery process in some
You
way?
know, I think most companies actually believe that they are trying to have a very customer-centric point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you don't put yourself in a practice's shoes, it's really hard to figure out if
Mm-hmm.
that's true or not. So, um,
Right.
everyone tries to some extent. I don't know if everyone's always as successful as you want it to be if you're a practice owner, so to speak.
Sure, sure. So you've been at the helm of many successful products. Can you talk about one of which you were especially proud, and the whole evolution of that product from concept to um, development to delivery?
Um, well, that's a great question. It's
Maybe we
always
should, if you want to
always
answer that
hard to
piece,
pick this
that's great
one. But, I think one of the brands, this is an old story, but I think it's,
That's great.
indicative of kind of the idea here.
Cool.
Um, Back in 2014, 2015, Galderma got approval for a brand called Perlane for a mid-face indication. So at the
Hmm.
time, this was very novel. It was the second brand with a mid-face indication. And we, as a company, made a decision to change the name from Perlane to Restylane Lift. And part of the
Hmm.
reason they did that was to make it easier to communicate to practices and patients kind of what the brand could do. It was known as especially good lifting brand. You had a new indication, so it made sense you changed the name at the time. At the time, everyone was like, "How can you change the name of Perlane?" Everyone's kind of heard of it, and you're like, "Yeah, but if you think forward and you think about like what else is coming, you really want to make it easier for practices to talk to their patients about hyaluronic acid fillers." And we had more products coming that were all going to be under the Restylane name. So it made sense to kind of change it versus, they have, I think, 9 products now. Could you imagine if they had 9 products all with different brand names? It's very, very hard for a patient or a practice to really figure out. It's hard enough when they're all branded under the Restylane name. So we got a lot of kudos for that. Everyone kind of laughed at us at the time, but it really reinvigorated the brand. That's still a great brand to this day. They've had multiple indications follow on from it afterwards, but that
Hmm.
one's pretty interesting because it was kind of a risk and it was innovation that wasn't an obvious innovation. Many
Hmm.
would have said it was just a me too, but the innovation really came from, hey, we had really good science. We wanted to get the customer centric marketing right to start as well. And then make sure that that was communicated well through practitioners to their patients and on and on and on. And now it's one of the largest hyaluronic acid filler brands in the world.
Mm.
So, and it's helped a lot of practices be very, very successful in treating their patients for a lot of different needs. So, a probably early example of this, like make the science match the messaging and do it in a way that is intuitively communication, easy to communicate to your various customer and consumer groups. So, good
Mhm.
story there from getting back on in the years. There's a lot of other ones. Wrestle and Kiss was
No,
really pretty good as well, and had a number of good things at Allergan and AMP as well that are fun to talk about.
right. I know. I know. It's we're kind of just brushing over the top of it because I know there's a lot into which you can go more deeply, but I don't want to get us bogged down. It just seems really intriguing. I'd love to sit down with you and learn that story because when you work with science, which is what we're dealing with, and then trying to communicate the science in a way that's compelling, not only to the medical spa owner, but also to the patient.
Hmm.
Can you walk us through that process? How does that transformation of knowledge and information happen?
This is probably one of the biggest challenges. Is like, how do you find that? What's that real crystal clear insight that you can
Mm-hmm.
really simplify? Like the challenge and the opportunity within aesthetics is to make it work. You have to say, hey, what I'm talking to a injector or a business owner about is X.
Yeah.
That practice is then going to talk to their patient base and they're going to say, hey, X equals, 1, 2, 3. And then the companies will talk to patients directly too. And if they're not also saying 1, 2, 3, if you're saying ABC, then patients get confused and nothing syncs up. So the real challenge in all this is like, how do you make your B to B to C and your D to C messaging all sync up to connect together? So you want whatever a practice is talking to a patient about to match how they would hear about the brand in other channels, whether that's PR, communications, advertising, other marketing venues, whatever it might be. And that's also got to match how all the practitioners are talking about it. So when you get your messaging really synced together is when you see a lot of success. When that messaging is backed by really strong science, you also see a lot of success. Or if that kind of go-to-market positioning is backed by a really good business model that is intuitive and matches the practice's needs, that also works. So a lot of ways to think about it, but when you get it all synced up is when you see a lot of really successful brands, products, services being built. When they get disconnected is when things aren't quite as successful. They're a little more niched and pigeonholed and things like that.
Yes, it makes sense. Completely makes sense. It can't communicate. It can't be received, and it can't be
At the
understood.
end of the day, I think people don't really do a good enough job on their branding. I'm a little bit old school. I gave a talk on this earlier this summer, but not enough people spend enough time like really knowing what their brand's all about, what the purpose is, what the essence is, and doing some of those basic strategic marketing blocking and tackling steps.
Right.
It's really easy to get kind of chase the performance marketing bug and follow the data down a rabbit hole in many respects.
That's right.
As you're placing your Google ads and looking at your SEO and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you really need to know what your brand's all about, be very true to that, and make sure that matches where the customer needs and customer insights are.
Absolutely. And since you brought it up, because it is so key, can you talk about branding and how imperative it is for every business, and especially in the med spa aesthetics business? Thank you.
Branding is actually really interesting. So I worked for Lilly. So Lilly developed brands like Prozac and Cialis and Mounjaro and a number of other kind of world-class brands. Many would argue that they are one of the best branding companies in pharmaceutical. And then when I worked for Galderma, they were owned by Nestle. And again, many would argue that Nestle is the best or one of the best branding companies in the world. What I found interesting is both those companies actually go about a very similar process to developing their brands. It's not dissimilar from what other people do, but they kind of had a very similar kind of step-by-step. At Lilly, they called it, you built your brand essence map. At Nestle, you built your brand purpose map, but it was all the same kind of elements. There's agencies that will charge you tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars to help you do this. But at the end of the day, there's some basic principles around like knowing very specifically who your customer is, what differentiates your brand, why you should believe that your brand is different. Those differentiators matter. What personality do you want to espouse? And then like, what's the core essence of what you're all about? The classic example I always use is, if you say BMW, most people say the ultimate driving machine. And that just like crystallizes what BMW is all about. Nike is just do it. And there's hundreds of other really good examples. When I look across aesthetics, people don't always have a great handle, and especially aesthetic practices, they don't know what their brand's all about. I was talking to someone else the other day, and they said they got a great question when they first started their med spa business. I was like, oh, what's that question? He said, someone looked at me and they said, why would I choose your med spa over the med spa, a mile away that has a great reputation? And he said, at first I was dumbfounded. I couldn't answer the question. And that's when I knew I didn't know what my brand was all about. And I think if you go poll a bunch of med spa owners, a lot of them can't answer that question. If you can't answer that question, it's going to be really hard to be successful.
Sure. Yeah. If you don't know who you are, you can't tell your message to your customer. If you can't describe your company to yourself in a succinct, compelling way.
If you can't describe it, why would anyone pick yours?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And you're not convinced of your uniqueness either. It's just kind of the message.
And also know what you're good at and what you're not good at. The other, you kind of keep playing this example out. Most med spas essentially offer the same services, right? They toxins, fillers, body contouring, facial services, skincare, whatever it might be. And there's some differentiation, but for the most part, everyone can offer the same thing. Just like all cars offer, steering wheels and brakes and radios and seats. But you get really good differentiated by like, what are they really good at? And also, what are they not going to do? So like, if you get into a BMW, you're not going to get kind of like cheap plastic parts. You're probably not going to get something that's as luxurious as a Rolls Royce, but you are going to get something that probably performs a little better than a Rolls Royce. So you got to know what you're good at, what you're not good at, and be okay with those differentiations.
Sure. Sure. The great analogies and great examples.
Yeah.
Let's go back to defining the customer, knowing who your customer is. That's one of the elements that you brought up in terms when a company goes through a branding exercise.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk to a practice or work with a brand right now as a consultant, advisor, fractional executive leader. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll one of the first questions is, okay, well, who's our customer? What's their persona or their avatar or whatever term you want to use.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably it's like, oh, we want someone in the 25 to 55-year-old demographic. They're female and they make over $100,000 a year. You're like, okay, great. That's not a person. That's not a customer. There's so many niches and differentiators in there. Like the really good brands know like exactly who their customers. They've defined them in a way that they have like they're an avatar. They live them. They've named them. They very
Mm-hmm.
specifically can tell you who they are. And that's their
Mm-hmm.
bullseye. And then they figure out around their bullseye, how do they keep drawing circles to figure out where their brand really plays very well.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they know who their bullseye customer is, and they're very true to that bullseye customer.
Right. So they know where they shop. They know which what are their preferred social media platforms.
Yeah.
They know the kind of product they like to buy and how they like to buy the product. And how does a med spa learn these things?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways to learn it. The first one is make sure you know the customer's walking in your door. So usually you start with who's coming in your door. But this is where you can use a lot of the performance marketing data that's been growing like wildfire through
Mm-hmm.
digital, social media, etc. So you really need to be mining that data because all that data exists. The superficial looks at it will give you the superficial targeting. The deeper looks at it will give you this like really deeper level targeting where you can really start to build different marketing funnels, different capabilities. But you should know who your best customer is, who you really want to build it around. Like if you could get 2,000, Serenas to walk in the door or whoever Zendaya is, if that's your target customer, if you get 2,000 people who look like Zendaya walking in your door, it wouldn't matter if you had 25 to 55 demographic because you honed in on who that best customer is, who you are uniquely built and differentiated to wow every time. That's who you want walking in. You want as many of those walking in as possible.
Mm-hmm. So would a questionnaire, so key in any of this data gathering, it can be gathered through the entire visit at a medical spa, at a clinic. So every person who has contact with the patient can learn something about the client or patient, and then together they can form a really accurate description.
Yeah. That's the best way of doing it. And if you can leverage a CRM or your EMR database to capture all that information, that's really, really powerful. So I definitely encourage people to make sure they know who their customer is, learn about them. To your point, like at the end of the day, these people, these are the people who remember your name and, talk to you about your kids and, whatever it is to make you feel special, however, make you feel special. I mean, I say this jokingly, but then I talk to my wife and my wife's like, I just want to go to a place where like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't need them to upsell me a pair of shoes. I know what I want. I'm walking there. I just want to be able to buy it really easily. Well, it's different than like someone who wants to come in and chit chat and get upsold from, the golden gooses to the Louboutins or whatever we're talking about in aesthetics. There's different people and there's different places for different people. So it's not like you have to mimic someone. You have to know who you are, who your customer is, and what you built your brand and your spa around.
And also it determines the line of services you provide, your menu.
Exactly.
Yeah. So wow. So a lot of this you are applying right now in your own company.
Yeah.
DFine. I love that name. DFine.
Yeah.
Double entendre.
We define answers to your greatest problems. If I ever get around to building a website, that'll be my tagline. So
you already
I need to do that.
That's a winner.
Yeah. No, almost all my work right now is just relationship and referral based. I've been fortunate if I've had a couple companies ask me to help them from a strategic advisory standpoint. Again, companies that are kind of doing unique and different things. One company is called Get Hair MD, where they have like a unique business model that can help practices kind of stand up a non-invasive hair vertical in their practice. Fascinating company.
Very
They've
cool.
tried to tackle this like everyone offers the same thing by giving you exclusive territories for their kind of, franchise. It's not a true franchise, but their kind of licensed product offering.
Uh-huh.
So it's not like everyone has the Get Hair MD offering. So you get kind of a unique offering to differentiate your spa. I was asked to be a strategic advisor for a company called Sentient Lasers, which is a really interesting company. Um, I think they service or repair or warranty 84 different devices that
Oh,
are used in aesthetic practices. They have a
yeah.
couple of their own proprietary devices that are pretty nice that they distribute as well. One called Tixel, one called Sculpt. But I really like that company because I was telling them about this thinking practice first idea, and that is their mentality. Because their whole thing is we don't really care what you buy. Our whole thing is whatever capital need you have in your practice, we can probably help. We can help service your brands. We can help warranty your products. We can buy used ones. We can sell you used ones. We could sell you some of our new proprietary devices. We can help you finance things. But whatever your need is, we can put your need first. And they're not tied into just like talking about whatever the latest and greatest thing is, and that's the only thing they care about. They can actually care about the practices needs first. They're thinking about how they build consulting services that are focused on practices needs first, and they can do that because they kind of see all the warts because they literally fix everything. It's kind of crazy.
Right,
Really cool company. I think you'll start hearing more and more about them too. And then I've got a few other companies I work with. Some I'm allowed to talk about, some I'm not. But there's just a lot of innovation coming. If you look at things like regenerative medicine, exosomes, some new early stage technologies, helping companies think about different business models and different ways to go to market that is, again, much more customer centric than maybe we're seeing at scale today. So really exciting times. Love working with the companies, work with some practices too. I love helping the practices. I've had a lot of people kind of ask me just to help think through strategically, like how do I deal with all this PE consolidation? How do I look at my marketing, spend vendors and partners? Am I doing this the right way? So been really happy, and I've got to work with some really amazing practices and amazing people. I get to learn a lot when I do that too. So I've had a lot of fun doing that over the past year or so, or 6 months or so.
It does sound like a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun. If anybody wanted to learn more about the companies you were able to mention, reach out to you and learn more.
Yeah, I saw you had my email and LinkedIn and phone and all that kind of stuff. I'm pretty easy to find.
I want to make sure that people can reach out to you.
Yeah, ping me on Instagram. Like I said, you sent me a message just through LinkedIn that, for whatever reason I answered, and happy that I did. It's been kind of fun chatting a little bit with you.
And as am I, I'm very happy that you did as well. So back to Get Hair MD. There's a mini franchise model. Could you help?
Yeah. Yeah. So the CEO was the CEO of Thermi, who sold to Almirall back in the last part of the decade. And then you look at hair. Hair's a huge opportunity. I just started the treatment as well, so hopefully I get a nice result. But essentially, he found a multimodal set of proven hair modalities, put them all together, all non-invasive. So no injections, no transplants, no PRP, not just like topical or pills, but like, non-invasive things that can help address hair loss and promote hair growth. And then put them all together. Also, it's not like this is the latest and greatest like innovation in hair. It's a bunch of proven things that work. And if you put them together, you get a nice result for patients. There's good before and after. There's good data to support it. And part of the innovation here was the idea originally was they were going to build a bunch of little micro clinics in all the salon suites where hairdressers are, right? You see these all over the place. There's like 30, 40 hairdressers. They're like, oh, we'll just put a, hair system in the micro clinics. They started in Dallas. They were doing pretty good. They were getting maybe $300,000-$400,000 a year in these micro clinics. The challenge of that, though, is it's really hard to scale. What are you going to open 2,000 of your own micro clinics? Like, it's hard enough running one or two medical practices, as many of the people watching this hopefully know. So they moved to a licensing model. So the idea was you could kind of stand up a hair vertical in most aesthetic practices, because most aesthetic practices actually don't treat hair very well. Maybe they do a little PRP. Maybe they sell some Nutrafol. Handful of them may do FUE transplants. So the idea was this is 85-90% of what you need to stand up a hair vertical. You get a geography around your practice where no one else can be part of the program. So, for example, there's probably about 20 or so geographies in Dallas. So you can imagine there's maybe 2,000 or so viable geographies around the country. So they've started to kind of grow from there. So they're early stage, they're growing. They're looking to expand. They have, I think, 16 or 17 kind of zones that they've sold nationally now, and are continuing to look for people who want to be part of the Get HairMD network. A lot of other benefits down the road too, but like I said, a unique business model take versus just like the latest and greatest innovation take. So the innovation there is the business model approach versus the product approach. And again, I like it because it's very practice centric. It's about like, what's the practice need? The practice need is I need something that differentiates me. Great. Here's a solution to help you do that.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And everybody's got a hair concern. Well, I'm generalizing, but I think that is a major
About
need.
50% of people, about 50% of people do have hair concerns in aesthetic practices.
Oh, awesome. Then there was another company that you mentioned that, could you tell us a little bit about that? The second company.
Yeah, sentient lasers. Yeah, they're the one who kind of take care of all the needs of a practice from a capital standpoint. So yeah, they just really interesting company. They just hired a new chief revenue officer, head of sales, new chief marketer as well. So company based out of Park City. Again, most aesthetics haven't heard of them, but I really like the team and how they go about their business, and I think they offer something that I hadn't seen before. Again, because their whole thing is like, I don't need to just shove whatever my newest product is down your practice's throat. They can really take this approach of like, what need do you have? How can I put your practice first? And if I do that, you're likely going to want to do more business with me over time. And they have a lot of businesses where they can work with you, whether it's buying, selling, fixing, warranting, selling you new. So I'm really intrigued by that company. I'm excited to kind of help them out from a strategic advisory standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. That's they need to understand probably the market, of each potential client at a micro level.
And then the last thing, one of the other things I'm actually really interested in too right now, I'm working with some partners. There's a huge training need that I see in the market. There's a lot of training going on, but again, if you kind of step back and put yourself like in the practice owner's shoes, there's no real answer for them on like, how can everyone within my practice get better educated, whether it's injectables, devices, skincare, business operations, marketing. There's no good way for the whole practice to learn in one place. So I'm working with a handful of people. We're going to try and find a solution to kind of put the practice first on the business owner side of things. There's so many people coming into this. There's so many experienced businesses. And, the other thing that I've seen over time, you mentioned this when we were talking beforehand, is the world keeps evolving and changing. When I started aesthetics, we didn't really have to do a lot of podcasts and videos like this. We actually did print advertising and TV ads and things like that. Well, now it's all social media and podcasts and video. And so you have to really continue to evolve. And I think that's the need that I'm seeing across all the practices is everyone's like, man, the world's changing so fast. Like I don't have easy ways to learn how to evolve fast with it. So if you can meet that need, I think there's some real good opportunity. If you can do it in a way that kind of scales and works across the whole practice, I think you can even add a lot more value. So really excited about that. More to come, kind of still in kind of stealth mode on that one. But I think I have some great partners, and we're pretty optimistic about kind of what we're going to try and bring to the market to help with the training education side of the business, and not just injection training. I mean, I've led the two big programs at Allergan and Galderma with AMI and Gain. But really, how do you have a practice owner's best interest at heart so that you can help their whole practice improve their knowledge, their skills, and their capabilities to serve their patients?
Right, serve their patients, and patient relations, and really deepening those relations to retain the patients is probably, I would guess, one of the modules that you're going to be adding to your educational.
Oh yeah, no, I really, it's not just about me. I want to make sure we're learning from everybody. So like the way that I personally learn, and you mentioned this too, you're like, well, I just watch a bunch of stuff on YouTube. And I'm helping my kids with their homework. And the way you learn is you go to Khan Academy and you search stuff on ChatGPT and you search stuff on Google. And like, you don't just learn from a book anymore. You don't just learn from a course. You actually learn from like multiple people in different ways of thinking, and you kind of interpret it all. So I think you got to get a lot of different ways of thinking for people to learn from versus just like, well, here's one person's point of view. One person's point of view may be really great for you, and they may be an amazing person, but a lot of times you're like, I want to hear this person, I want to hear that person, I want to hear this person, and then I'm going to make it my own with the unique things that are going on with me and my practice and my patients. So that's kind of the mentality.
Yes, absolutely. I was every step of the way with you when you were describing the process.
Oh yeah.
So one of the things too that I wanted to ask that kind of ties back to something you said earlier, and that was not only with the training, but would training also help retain practitioners, providers? That's something that I understand is a really key problem, holding
Oh
on
yeah.
to your best providers.
Well, I mean, I think you hold on to your best providers when you have a really great culture.
Mm,
Someone asked me the other day, they're like, what do you think makes a great aesthetic practice? And I said, well, if I'm very forward looking, I think there's a few things, but it all starts with one. And the first thing I see in all great aesthetic practices is they have a really great culture. And if you have a great culture, people tend not to want to leave because they really like working there, and you're probably, taking care of them monetarily, and the work-life balance is right, and it's a fun place to be. And people tend not to leave places with great culture. So, great aesthetic practices start with great cultures. And then
sure,
if I'm
sure.
very forward looking, the other thing I'm seeing is really great aesthetic practices are taking advantage of the technological revolution that's happening. So they're using all these great technologies that are in place that are very customer friendly. They
Mm,
have online booking, they have really good EMRs, they understand their data, they're probably using membership and loyalty programs.
mhm.
Um, there's a handful of other things they're probably doing as well. But if you're very forward looking, that's what I see really great practices doing. Have a great culture and leverage technology to really take advantage of the step change that's happening, especially post COVID, on how you can go to market and serve your patients more effectively.
Right. And these actually two elements could be competitive advantages for your
No,
practice.
I think so. And there's not enough practices are actually doing all of them very well.
Mm-hmm. So how can they do those things better?
Well,
Would you
that is the secret sauce, right? I wish I
right?
could tell you exactly how, but I think what you
Mm,
see is that a lot of it is just focus. If you're focused on that stuff, you can tend to be pretty successful. If you're focused on managing your P&L, then you're focused on managing your P&L. If you're focused on building your culture, leveraging technology, building a great business, the rest of it kind of tends to come. When
mhm,
you focus on I hear a lot of people right now, especially with all the consolidation going on, they're focused on like multiples and selling out, and do I join, do I not join? And the companies are talking about how do they scale and get big. And I keep telling people, you can talk about like buyouts and sellouts and consolidation and PE and multiples and E or EBITDA, but like at the end of the day, if you just focus on building a good business, the rest
mm,
of it takes care of itself. If you
sure.
focus on trying to find a number, it may work, but oftentimes you can run into operational issues.
No, that's right. Because people are very key in the aesthetics business. So it begins possibly with hiring the right people, knowing who you are and the kind of people you want to be in your practice. So
Yeah, hiring's always a tough one. Probably the bane of everyone's existence, but also the
mhm,
really exciting one. I heard someone the other day. I actually don't agree with this one. There's a kind of like common like hire slow, fire fast kind of
I've heard
idea.
that.
Everyone says it. I actually think it's a bunch of BS. There's some elements of truth into it, um, but like if you found the right person, why in the world would you hire slow? That's the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. So I
Mhm,
think the real key is like find the right people, and when you find the right people, hire them fast.
mm,
Um, if you have the wrong people, get rid of them fast. So it's not about hire slow, fire fast. Because if you hire slow, you may pass up a great person. Uh, if I would have hired slow in one of my previous jobs, I would have missed two great people because they would have gone to other opportunities. So that's the
mhm,
silliest thing I've ever heard.
mhm.
It sounds great. It makes for a really good soundbite. And if you don't think about it, people are like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." But no, it's not about hiring slow, firing
No,
fast. It's not about the speed that you do anything. It's really
right.
about how do you find the right people who fit your culture and who you want to be on your team. And the
Mhm.
minute you find them, get them on board.
Yeah,
So
don't waste any time because somebody else is going to snatch them up.
exactly.
Like, especially if they're super rare. in terms of personality, skills. If they're the entire package,
Yeah.
then of course you want to hire them quickly.
And you
And
probably want to always be recruiting. Like the really good leaders and managers, they have a Rolodex of people. So if they had a new opportunity or new opening, they're
Mhm.
not just posting a job on Indeed or Job Snob or whatever and hoping you get a good person. They've got a network. They know who they want. They made some phone calls and they're bringing those people onto their team because they're going to build their culture and build their business the way they want to. So
Right. So being actively recruiting, not just being
always,
waiting for the right person to walk in the door,
yeah,
actively
always.
recruiting and keeping your eyes and ears open for the right person.
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. So you mentioned earlier private equity. Can you comment a little bit about what is going on in that part of aesthetics?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of noise and a lot of buzz because there's a lot of private equity companies looking to get into aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of go back to my main lesson I learned from business school, which was rule number one is find a really good market. Well, aesthetics is a really good market, right? Attractive
Mm-hmm.
demographics, cash pay, growing through financial recessions, through COVID, even growing now despite all the choppiness. So
Mm-hmm.
that's rule number one. Rule number two is, you know, have a clearly differentiated kind of point of view on how to win in those really good markets. And I think a lot of these private equity companies think that they have a good idea. And you look at a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other industries and you've seen the same consolidation trend happen because you have a lot of kind of small business owners. It's hard to work at scale sometimes as a small business owner. It's hard to get
Mm-hmm.
access to the same technologies. It's hard to get access to the same kind of buying power and leverage points.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that make it relatively not easy, but they make it attractive for PE firms to come in, consolidate a bunch of practices, and get some of those benefits. So you're seeing a pretty big explosion of that. You saw it happen in dermatology in the
Mm-hmm.
latter half of the last decade. You're seeing it happen with med spas and plastic surgery practices now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a trend that's going to continue. You should definitely pay attention to it. I should definitely be prepared for it. You should always be scanning the market. You never know when the right time to potentially join one of these groups is. Not everyone has to, but there certainly are advantages for some people at the right time. So
You're
uh,
right.
I think it's interesting, though. It's they also a lot of them have imported people from non-aesthetic areas, which is good. There's a lot to learn from people in non-aesthetic areas.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is just something unique about running aesthetic practices, and if you're not careful, you can definitely run into operational issues, which you kind of have seen rumors of, and a lot of them are very successful. Not all of them, so you just kind of vet all the opportunities. Well, if you look at a lot of the ancillary industries, dermatology, ophthalmology, veterinary, a lot of them are very successful. Some of them aren't. But I think the trend's going to continue. So it would behoove everyone to make sure they have a good understanding of their business and the trends that are going on.
Right. And as well as when there's money to be made and lots of it,
Yeah.
lots of people want to join in the party and be part
Yeah.
of the business.
Although I do keep saying, I keep coming back to like when all you there, that is definitely true. Although if that's the primary focus, if the focus is on like how much equity valuation can we create or how much EBITDA can we create, and that's the first thing you're focused on,
Mm-hmm.
personally, I don't think you're going to lead to the most success. A lot of people will be successful doing that. I think the more successful ones are the ones who focus on how do we build a really great business? Because you build a really great business, the rest of it follows. And that will be a very highly valued business down the road, whether it's independent or consolidated or sold or IPO'd or reverse
Mm-hmm.
mergered or whatever happens to it.
Sure.
If you focus on building a great business that, serves patients well and the rest of it tends to follow.
Right. And to your point, a business that has a great culture that you want to retain, and because it works for the
Yeah.
business. I was part of a company where it was taken over by an outside group that did not understand the culture, and they wanted to change or how important a culture was in the business. They wanted to change several things that were actually key to having a culture of sharing and creativity. They
Yeah.
put too many rules around the company, and people left.
Yeah. And
So,
there's not one right or wrong answer on types of
mhm,
culture or personality. I certainly have a point of view on how I like to build and lead teams, just like I'm sure you
mhm,
do and others. There's no right or wrong. I just got to be true to it. But
true. No, absolutely, absolutely. So you can now pick and choose the companies you want to work with. What kind of companies are you looking forward to work with?
Well, I tend to like the companies that are trying to solve problems in unique and different ways.
Mhm,
I really like to work with companies that are kind of growing and scaling and building.
mhm,
I've always found my most passion where I think I can kind of add the most value. So those are the types of companies that I'm working with. I've worked with small companies. I've seen companies grow from medium sized to really big. I've worked with really big brands. I've worked with solo practices. I've seen consolidation into many practices. So I've
mhm,
kind of seen a lot of different things. But I tend to focus my areas on new innovation, different ways of thinking. How do you better serve a market in a way that's not being served? How do you build and grow and scale companies,
mhm.
brands, opportunities, teams? Those are the types of areas where I kind of tend to spend most of my time. But I'm also very open minded, so I tend to listen a lot. I try to at least. Try to ask a lot of questions. Try to be inquisitive and really kind of understand other people and learn from their stories, kind of like you reached out and now we're having a really nice conversation. That wouldn't have happened if you don't do that. So I do that kind of in general because you never know where the next cool, interesting opportunity might come from.
No, you don't. So you with your open mind or and learning every step of the way as you deal with different companies who are working on creating the next big
Yeah.
solution.
I always, I think you might have mentioned this, but like my personal leadership principles are I like to do really great work. I like to have fun while I'm doing it, and I like to learn something along the way. So it's, do great, have fun, learn something. So that's my brand essence, hopefully. Um, but especially when you're in the kind of role that I'm in right now, it is
Mhm,
a lot of the learn something. You really want to put yourself in a position where you're kind of like inquisitive and learning new things. And how do you kind of take something from over here and apply it to over here? Because
mm,
that's where you can really help companies kind of accelerate and go to different levels and accomplish things they might not have known about because I can see things in a different way that other people can't. That's kind of the benefit and value of this kind of consulting, advising, strategic executive kind of fractional leadership stuff that I'm kind of got my fingers in right now.
yeah, cool. So I've got to ask you this question because AI is everywhere. Can
Mhm.
you comment on how you see AI is affecting the aesthetics industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changing by the day. Personally, I found that it can save a lot of time. You can use it for answering questions, for visualization, for writing, for creative content development. I mean, the tools are endless. I think everyone's just trying to put AI into everything they do. I don't know what it actually means half the time, but certainly these large language models allow access to information in shockingly different ways than we used to have it. They can totally streamline and enhance productivity
Mhm,
in ways we haven't even really thought of. I'll give an example. Like, I used to write a press release. You can talk to your PR agency. They'd, take some time. They'd write a draft. You'd review it. Now you can go in and be like to, various AI tools and be like, write a press release, blah, 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 blah. You get a really good first draft. You got to go edit it. You can't just take what it does and post it. But man, you can use that. Shorten it. You probably saved you half a day of work or a day of work.
that's
I
tremendous.
used to just do Google searches. Well, now there's so many ads in the Google search now, and in Google they have their bar generative AI. I've
Mhm,
actually just been using that to answer all my questions, and they're answered in a way that are much more intuitive, and I think
mhm,
that's what you're seeing. So,
mhm.
um, yeah, it's not going away. It's going to be a huge piece of what you do. It's going to help you with advertising, marketing, SEO, product identification. People are using it for these like visualizers. I mean, it's going to be endless. We're in the very
Right.
early stages, so not going away. Certainly, we should be kind of on top of it and thinking about it. But don't let AI think for you. It helps you think more effectively, but don't let it
I
think for you.
That's been my experience too. It helped me think more effectively, more creatively, more openly. I
And
just
let's
really
be clear,
welcome.
it really helps me when I'm doing. I've got a 13-year-old and 16-year-old, so that
Mhm.
math is. I used to be really good at it, forgot a lot of it, but it's helping me help them with their homework in really nice ways.
That knowledge is still back there. You just have to retrieve it, and
Yeah,
AI can help you do that, which is fantastic, right?
yep.
Yeah, we just have a couple of minutes left, and my gosh, the time just flew. Drew, it really flew. I had such a wonderful time.
Well,
But
thanks for having me.
Oh, and I'd like to have you back if you have the inclination or the desire. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah,
You're a wealth of information,
yeah.
and my listeners, I feel like I've learned a lot. You've packed a lot into the time that we've had together. Now, maybe next time we can go dive a little deeper and understand some of
Sounds
the
good. Well,
nuance.
maybe if I find a really cool opportunity that I get really excited about, I can come back on and we can kind of dive deep into
Yes,
what that's really all about.
yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. I welcome that opportunity too. So, are there any takeaways or parting words that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I would just say, listen, it's this is a really great industry. Treat everyone with respect and interest, and tend to have everyone kind of take the positive view and assume positive intent from everyone. Not
Mhm.
everyone has it, but it's much easier to get through life if you're kind of thinking that way. So um, I've that's kind of what I've been telling people, and maybe that's just having 4 kids and you want them to grow up well, but just assume the best in everyone, and have a little bit of grace and understanding. You never know what other people are going through at that season of life. But for the most part, we're blessed to be in a great industry. We spend all day helping people look and feel better about themselves. There's certainly much worse things we could be doing. So let's just be happy about that.
Well, you packed a lot into that last minute, Drew. Thank you.
You bet.
Really, really valuable information that you shared with us today.
Well, have a nice night, and thanks for having me. We'll talk to
Yes,
everyone later.
so much, right? And thank you again. We'll
All
be
right.
in
Thanks,
touch.
Mel. We'll see everybody. Bye.
All right. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone, for watching today. And like you heard, Drew will join us again at some point later in maybe this year or next year. But I want to invite you to tune in again for next our show next week. We're going to be featuring Audrey Neff, who is the director of marketing for a wonderful company that is going to be talking to us about marketing to millennials. Kind of an opportunity that med spas have not taken advantage of, but you do want to stay in touch with us and join us next week when we have Audrey Neff and share her experiences and her knowledge about marketing to that very, very great group that's not being advantaged right now. So until the next time, please have a great week and take care.